Welcome to the South Island portion of these videos. So the very first section on the South Island is from Wellington to Havelock or Nelson. And I put that hyphen in there or that slash in there because you kind of have a choice here. And I'm going to get more into that as the video wraps up and we get closer to that town proper. But yeah, the first section on the South Island, you get the ferry over to the South Island, and it's about a 4 or 5 hour ferry ride, probably closer to that 4-hour mark. And we took the Inter-Islander. There is another ferry service called the Blue Bridge Ferry, not Blueberry, that you can take, and I would coordinate those times about 5 days to even a week in advance because they do fill up very quick. It's not only for locals, but it's also for a lot of tourists that want to experience going across the waterway from island to island. So I would recommend booking the ferry well in advance if you want to coordinate your miles and your days exactly the way that you want to schedule that. So when you get to the town of Picton, it is a very small town. They do have a lot of amenities, motels, restaurants, places to stay because it is kind of a very big tourist town. It's the first South Island town for many people that take that ferry over. Again, I would recommend booking in advance. We got lucky and we got a campsite in the holiday park, but even the camp spots in the holiday park were very filled up, so I would recommend booking in advance. I can't stress that enough. We ran into a lot of logistical issues, not only in the town of Picton, but ultimately in the town of Havelock and Nelson further on. We were there in the first week of January, which is a very popular time for tourists and locals for break. So again, depending when you get there, cannot recommend enough booking stuff in advance. So the first day when you leave Picton, you start the Queens Charlotte track. And as you saw with the scene ago, there was a permit that you need to get when you go to the boat to catch your ferry. They will give you that permit that you carry. This is an overview of the elevation gain that you have on it, and it's pretty straightforward. It is a great ride in New Zealand, which means it's graded for bikes. So you should be able to hold a pretty standard pace on it. There is a lot of climbs and descents, but overall it's graded for a bike, so you could hold a very quick pace. We broke it into more days than we originally had planned for. One, just because we were tired, and two, it's just a beautiful, beautiful chunk of trail. You could theoretically push through it very quickly because it is graded for bikes. Again, it comes down to personal preference, personal opinion. You can choose what to do there. There are a whole lot of camping options along here. These camping options are first come, first serve. You do not book these camping options in advance on the Queen Charlotte track. You just walk into there, and usually they will have a TA section, or they'll put you in a quote-unquote overflow section, so you should be able to find a spot to camp. You do have a lot of options. So these are the views that you get for days along this track. As I said, it is very, very gorgeous. I have a lot of film of the waterways, almost too much. This is when you first start experiencing weka birds. As you see, it's called a weka. And these wekas have no fear of humans. One, I think they adapt to the amount of tourists that travel this trail, but they will still steal the food directly out of your hands, so be aware with those birds. Unlike the kiwi, which is very reclusive, this bird will come straight at you to get your food. So you have some ascents and descents in the beginning. I didn't talk on that, but you have a long gradual climb to the top of a few scenes ago, and then you drop back down. And the flavor of this trail overall is you have a lot of micro ups and downs that I've talked about in prior videos. But the difference with this is it is graded for that bicycle. I'm saying that again, and it really plays a factor into how quick you can hold your pace. You can hold anywhere from a 3 mile per hour pace to a 4, even if you wanted to. So very beautiful forest. There are a lot of cicadas. Again, it could be the time of year we were there, but I would recommend bringing some type of earplugs or headphones. They can actually get very loud, and it makes it difficult to not only sleep, but also it's just very loud when you're going through the forest. They did have a landslide here, as you see in this scene, but especially with it being a very highly populated trail portion, they will take care of that very well, and it didn't really hamper our pace at all. So we dropped down into another place here, which has more camping options, and this kind of signifies the start of when you start going through smaller kind of pockets of communities, like 2 or 3 miles long. You go through these kind of like sprawls of, I don't want to use communities, but like beachside kind of condo / rental / vacation homes. I didn't get a whole lot of film of it, but I got most of the forested section, but you do go through that kind of area. And Madsen's Camp is a privatized campground. You do pay to camp at all of these places. It's usually anywhere from $10 to $20 per person New Zealand. So you do pay at all of these campgrounds. So bring cash, because they do only accept cash. So Camp Bay campsite is the spot that we shot for the first night. Again, you can do way more miles if you want to, do less, it's your prerogative. Camp Bay campsite is kind of a terraced camp spot, and it has 3 levels, and it's gonna be very busy. So you just pick and choose the best spot you can get. I'm pointing out all the tents, and this was like level 2, and there was a level below us, a level above us, and it was just every flat spot was taken. It is going to be a very popular trail, so I would even recommend getting to camp earlier than you prefer, just to be able to get that flat spot. So if you camp there the 3rd day, we decided to go to Mistletoe Bay. It has bioluminescence bacteria in the water. I hope I use that term correctly. It's a big tourist attraction. That's what brought us to that place for this day. When you leave Camp Bay, if you hit that sign, Paronga Bay, you went the wrong way. I don't know where it left from our camp in the morning, but there was a steep ascent that we ended up like walking kind of a roundabout way. So this is one of the views that you hit on your first climb of the day, and the views will just keep getting more and more magnificent this day. Again, I spliced in a whole lot of film of these views just because it is just epically gorgeous. You just got broad sweeps of the water, broad sweep of these kind of little bluff/hill things, and there's a lot of these touristy boards that I just showed you. That's, I don't want to use the word touristy, informational boards. And after another climb, you'll get to this place called the Lookout. We heard from hikers that it is actually very beautiful, but we'd been getting so spoiled with views, we didn't feel the need to go up there. May have missed out. Again, your own prerogative there. If you want to go up, it's a quick out and back to get to that view spot. So once you pass that view spot, you'll have some more kind of roller coastery miles of descents, ascents. Again, it's the flavor of, I've said this a lot, New Zealand in general. A lot of ups and downs. So this is a very beautiful break spot. I didn't film everybody that was behind us at this point. Very popular, great lunch spot if your miles link up. And yeah, once you leave this area here, you'll start getting into more camping options again, and overall you'll start getting into more ultimately scenic stuff. So the Queen Charlotte track does require a permit. The permit is a broad permit. You do register with them for where you think you're going to get to each day, but you do have flexibility to pick and choose and like change your mind each day of where ultimately you will like to camp. So we continue walking along here, and it's just beautiful forest. That's kind of also the flavor. It puts you out on these pockets of open expanse where you can see stuff, and then it drops you back down into the forested section, rinse and repeat. And these benches are all sporadically placed throughout for great viewpoints to sit, take a break, take a snack, take lunch, and just soak in these views. This is, I would highly recommend trying to coordinate your time to hit this in good weather. We knew about some hikers that hit it in rain. They still loved it, but ultimately good weather, you can't beat these types of scenes right here. And if you saw that person in the bottom left of your screen, that shows you the kind of the descent that you normally do. There is water at every campground. Please check me on that if you are going to specific campgrounds. Every campground we passed, I believe we saw water. There are not a whole lot of natural sources the first day to 2 to 3 days, depending on your pace. The very last day into the town of Havelock, there is more natural sources, but ultimately they're at the camp spots. It is a bike trail, as I've said, so be aware that there will be bikers behind you, in front of you. Just stay aware when you're walking that trail so you don't get mowed down by a bike. This signifies kind of the end of the broad, like, backcountry portion of the Queen Charlotte track, at least in my opinion. When you cross this road, you have very steep roller coasters. If you thought you'd been doing roller coasters before, these ones are very steeply up, very steeply down. But it signifies the end of what I consider the backcountry, because you start getting to more of these quote-unquote front country camps that have more amenities. A lot of the spots prior were DOC camps or more smaller pocket privatized camps. The camps ahead from that road onwards do have more amenities. So you do a climb, you get to the top, and then you drop back down the backside. And this shows also the kind of descent overall. Again, it is bike track, so it's not going to be ultimately too steep, but it does actually add up, especially if you're doing a longer mile day. They do have also these benches that are sporadically placed. You'll see Magpie sit down right here that really are nice, especially in shady portions, to kind of collect yourself. And water with this track, I want to point that out. I pointed out that there's not a whole lot of natural sources, but I would also recommend carrying more water than not. Even though it's bike track and you can hold a pace, carrying that water will give you the options to push farther if need be, push past a place that might have a dry water tank. I know that may be rare, but just be prepared to carry more water than not. So this is Mistletoe Bay. It's that popular place I was telling you about. They'll always create room for TA hikers. Their office does close at 5, but they have an honesty policy that if you camp, you'll just pay them cash in the morning. We got there luckily right before it closed, so we could settle up with them, and they just said, pick a place that's flat, pretty much. So this day, most hikers will either go to the town of Havelock or this bar that is right before. And once we get to that scene, I'll talk more about that bar. But the track itself on the way into the town of Anaquah, again, part of my pronunciation, it's way more gentle than the past day to past 2 days, past 3 days, depending on your pace of what you've been doing. There are still climbs and descents, but ultimately the grade is way easier. And if you even go all the way back to the beginning of the video and look at that elevation profile overview before we got on the ferry, it kind of shows you that it does start leveling out a little bit. You still will climb, you still will descend, but you can hold that standard pace that you can kind of expect to get to a certain area at a certain time, knowing your own pace. So here's more of those natural sources I was talking about. They do start coming up more frequently this day on the way into the town of Havelock, and these broad sweeping views. There was a landslide there. It didn't affect the trail, but then it puts you through these beautiful forests. Nice to regroup, get some shade while you're down in there. And as you kind of peek out on this climb, there's a beautiful bench coming up here in this next scene, and informational board. It tells you about the land, tells you about the surrounding area, and this will signify your ultimate descent into the town of Anaquah, part of my pronunciation. And that town that you get into, it's not really a full service town. You can camp there if you coordinate with a trail angel or a specific camp spot beforehand, but ultimately most people will push past it. It's kind of just the entrance and parking area to access the Queen Charlotte track from the other side. That last kilometer will let you know you got 1K left, so soak it in. And you can see the smile on Magpie's face because epically gorgeous part of the trail. One of our favorites up until this point for sure. So this is the quote-unquote town. Again, it's more of a parking area and kind of an entrance into the Queen Charlotte track from people going the opposite direction. There's a little coffee caravan that does serve coffee. I think it closes down at 3 p.m. So if you want to time that, you should get there earlier. So when you leave the Queen Charlotte track, you start off on road, and this road will ultimately lead you into kind of a bluff side track. The bluff side track only is about a mile or two, and it's graded well. A lot of people probably hike it because it is popular area and it's just easy walking through there. And ultimately this will lead you into the road walk towards the town of Havelock. I say road walk lightly because it's mostly bike path again. You do walk parallel to this road for a long time, but it's on this type of quality track that I'm showing you here. So the bar is about to come up in this next scene here, right here. This person offers free camping, quote unquote, for TA hikers. And when I say quote unquote free, they do want you to purchase a meal. Most likely you're going to be hungry anyway, and they have really good food, but they will let you camp. I'm not positive where, we did not stay there, but I'm assuming somewhere in this yard. And I know a lot of TA hikers utilize this spot because they do give you food, they let you camp, and get prepared for the next day. If you decide to push past that bar, Havelock's another 8 miles or so away, and the first few miles are more of this coastal kind of parallel to the road walking. Eventually this coastal walk will end, and it will put you into this portion coming up here, which is called the, I'm going to butcher this name, sorry, Wakapa Scenic Reserve. I guess I missed that scene, but you do more of the coastal walk here, and this is the reserve I was talking about, Mahakapwa. Yeah, butchered the name, I apologize. But it puts you into the scenic reserve, and that kind of signifies the end of your road until the last mile into Havelock. It does have a longer ascent in here, less roller coaster and more just consistent ascent. And you get up to the top here and have broad sweeping views. Again, just beautiful. So once you drop down that backside, you get to see the town of Havelock, which I pointed at right there. And then you start your ultimate descent into Havelock. Really easy, really well graded, 2-track, pseudo single track type stuff. More natural water sources along the way if you do desire to filter and fill them up. So it is still a bike path, still watch out for those bikers ultimately. This was low tide, so usually that area is probably more filled up with water. And this is the last mile and some change into the town of Havelock. It's a very quiet road, And this is the entrance. This is a Havelock itself. We did say at the Havelock Holiday Park, they will accept hiker packages. They're extremely, extremely friendly to hikers. Again, can't recommend enough booking in advance. Even this thing had like one camp spot left. So this is why I did Havelock/Nelson. So in the town of Havelock, there's a few places you can stay, but they were all booked up because of the popularity of this town. But you can schedule an inner city bus. I think it leaves once a day to get to the town of Nelson, about an hour away by road. And Nelson is a bigger city, and you can have access to more amenities, more places to stay, and ultimately just a bigger access to everything there. I'm pointing at my shoes right here because originally we were going to try to hike out, but the shoes got there earlier than anticipated, and I really needed new shoes. I cannot recommend highly enough either getting your new shoes in Wellington or making sure the postage arrives before you do, because the next section after this is the Richmond Ranges, and by no means, if I had the shoes I'm throwing out here in the Richmond Ranges and not new shoes, I would have been going a quarter mile per hour and just been fearful much of the time. I cannot recommend enough having traction for once you go into the Richmond Ranges. They are extremely, extremely technically difficult, so be prepared. We also went into Nelson because it was supposed to rain all of the next day. And again, the Richmond Ranges, do not underestimate this upcoming section, because if it's raining in there, the track quality is so, for lack of a better word, chunky and technical that if it's pouring down rain, you do not want to be out hiking in that stuff. I say that and people hear that and they're like, I walk in the rain all the time. It's a different thing. It's hard to convey that point enough that if it's pouring down in the Richmond Ranges, it is not safe to continue hiking for the most part. Again, it's your own opinion, your own preference. All I can do is give you guys information. So this is the town of Nelson. I kept these scenes long because I wanted to give that explanation of really checking the weather forecast, really making sure your gear's set, your food's set. Pack out more food than less food going into the Richmond Ranges, because you cannot hold 20 miles per day unless you are hiking for 18 plus hours. So really make sure you're situated before you go into the Richmond Ranges. There is no bailout until close to the end, and it will take far longer than you expect. There's a lot of hazards. There's a lot of technical stuff. Logistically, you have to get from hut to hut most of the time. The Richmond Ranges cannot be underestimated. So either stay in the town of Havelock or Nelson and get your gear right, get your food right, get your mind right, make sure the weather's right. A lot of factors come into play here, and you will be able to catch a bus back from the city of Nelson to the town of Havelock. Again, coordinate that in advance so you're ready to hit the trail on a nice sunny day, rested and ready to ultimately tackle the upcoming section.